Welcome to SAP UI5 tutorial for the beginners. So in this tutorial we are going to look at uh, the project structure of this SAP UI5 application or SAP UI5 project, the one we created in the previous tutorial. So let's have a look at the Eclipse in here, and this is what the project we created. So if you take a look at all these files over here, so if you can see here, this is the name of the project which we have given, and it has some predefined project structure, and here you have Java resources. You can write the Java code over here, and then here there is something called as web content, and in here this is meta inf folder, and here if you can see here there is a folder created inside this web content, so with the name my first SAP UI project. Okay, so if you can see here, so there are two files got created. One is a controller and the second one is a view, and then in here there is something called as web.inf, and then so inside this web.inf lib folder, and here it is a web.xml and index.html. Okay, so if you can see, if you run this project, so this is what this is what the output of this particular project what we created. If you have a look at this particular project structure, you can if you have the knowledge on normal Java web applications, so this is it's a Java web application, I can say. So if you can see here, a web application should have the web.inf folder and then lib folder and web.xml. So because of execution of this project, so we are going to see the output like this. So if you see the URL over here which got generated, so here this is index.html. That means what we are able to see the output of this particular index.html, right? So if you have a look at the index.html, what is there inside this? Let's give a right click and open with HTML, and so this is the content of this index.html. Okay, so inside this index.html, if you can see here, so anyways HTML by HTML tag and head by head. So inside this head tag you can see the script by script tag. So inside this particular script tag, so what we are loading over here is, so we are trying to load SAP UI core.js. So uh, this is the heart of the application, I can say. Okay, so we are loading SAP UI5 core.js, and then we are just giving an ID to this particular script tag, so that will be fine. And then so we are trying to load sap.m library. Sorry, so sap.m, so SAP UI5 is a combination of multiple libraries like SAP M and SAP Commons and SAP UI Core, and there are so many libraries which are there inside SAP UI5. So among all this library, this is one of the libraries, so we are using it over here. And if you can see here, the theme we are mentioning it as SAP Blue Crystal. So there are a few themes which are predefined by SAP, and we can use those themes to configure here. So since we are using the Blue Crystal theme, so you can see the output like this. If you would have used a different theme, so then obviously the output will be different. Okay, so that is what about this particular tag. And if you can see here, script by script again, so we are just registering the local resources. That means we are just registering this particular folder inside this folder. So if after registering this particular folder, so we are going to create an object of sap.m.app. Okay, so sap.m.app is a class. Okay, so let's not get into all these things in detail here. So just have a look at this, like we are creating one application object. So application is, it's a combination of multiple pages, right? So then after creating the application object, what we are doing is, so we are just trying to read the view, so which is this particular view which got generated. So that means what, so whenever you create an application, so here it is generating view.js. So since we can create XML files also, so we did not choose in the XML format, so that is the reason by default it is creating some JS file. So it's a view. Okay, so let's forget about either it is XML or JS. So but here we are trying to read a view. Okay, so this is of type JS. Okay, so we are trying to read this particular view, and then we are just placing in here. That means we are creating an object of this particular content of the view. Okay, so we got the view over here, and then finally I mean the view object we are adding into a variable called page. So once we get this particular object, we are going to add this particular page to the application object which we created over here. So finally the total output of all these things we are placing at the content. See, what is this content? Content is a div tag here. So finally, so whichever the output which we got because of this particular view.js, we are placing this one inside this particular div. Okay, so this is what we are doing over here. If you have a look at this view, so what we are doing here, so since it is a JS, so I will create the one XML file also. So here we are trying to create the content. Okay, so here what we are doing over here, so we are just creating an SAPM dot page object. So we are giving title as title. So here you can give this my first application. Okay, so I change this particular name to this one, and here you can give the content. So whichever the content you want, so you can place it over here. So now if you refresh this, since I just changed the name of title of the page, so you can see that page title got changed over here. So that means what? So in this particular view we are returning the page object. So whichever the page object which we return, so we are taking it over here and we are adding it to this, and then we are placing it here, right? So this is how this particular index.html by default it is getting loaded over here. So if you have a look at this web.xml and go to the source and go here, you can see welcome file list by welcome file list. So inside this we have mentioned index.html as a welcome file. So that is the reason, so by default it is executing this index.html, and then so once it executes index.html, obviously the control will come here, it will load all this UI core.js, and then finally it will register this particular location. That means this particular folder, it will create the app object, and then it will create the page object. So page object, how we are creating over here, so we are just reading this particular controller, we are reading this particular view.js, that means this view, and then we are creating the instance out of it, and then we are adding it to the application object, and finally we are placing this application at this particular content. So what is this content? So division is this particular content. Okay, content is nothing but a div over here, right? So this is how it is going to execute. In case if you want to change the title and if you want to develop this particular web page, you can directly go to this particular view, and then you can create it over here inside this particular content array. You can create the content of that particular page. Okay, so this is by default it is generating JS files. Okay, so now what we can do is let's close all these files. Okay, and go to this project explorer view and give a right click and go to the new and create one more project of type SAPUI5. Okay, click on next, give a project name. So I'm gonna give the project name as test project 1. Okay, so here, so I'm just creating a project called test project 1. So I'm here, you can see there are two radio buttons. Either you can, so in case if you want to develop this application for the web desktop, then you can choose SAP UI Commons. Okay, in case if you are developing this particular project for the mobiles or tablets, then you can use sap.m. That means this is a mobile library. Okay, so let's take this one for the being of time. So click on next, and in here, so it is asking for what is the view. So what is the view name, so in your project? So let's take home. Okay, I'm just giving the name of this particular view as home. So here you can select the type of the view. So earlier it was JavaScript. Either you can select JavaScript or XML or JSON or HTML. So the SAP has been provided, SAP has provided 4 ways of views. So whichever the view you are flexible with, so you can choose that. So that means if you select the JavaScript, so you can write the JavaScript coding to develop your GUI. Okay, if you use XML, so you are going to use XML file to create the views, and if you use JSON, you are going to use JSON files to create your views. So this is HTML way of developing the um, SAP web applications. Okay, so for I'm okay with this XML. So in case if you are not able to read something with the help of XML, then you can use JavaScript. So I prefer XMLs. Okay, so let's choose this XML and click on next and click on finish. So now let's have a look at this project structure. So the project structure is same as the previous project structure. So only the difference is this one. So now you can see, so view.xml got created. And if you see in a previous project, so view.js. That means here you need to write a JavaScript code to write, to develop the GUI. Okay. So but in here in this particular project, so we are going to use XMLs. So because I am using XML, because the XML is more readable when compared to the JS. Okay, so now what I will do is I'll just simply run this particular project. So let's see what's gonna happen. Yes, it will take some time. Yeah, maybe a couple of minutes. Yes, you can see here now the project is up and running. Okay, so let's copy. Okay, don't copy this. So this is output of this particular project. So when you run this, right? So how come we are getting this title over here? If you go to this view.xml, so you can see here this is a page by page tag. So inside this page by page tag, so what I am going to say, this is the title is an attribute. So since the title attribute is already defined, assigned with a value called title, so that's the reason we are able to see this particular title over here. In case if you want to change the title of this page, you can give a different value here, right? So let's give a different value like my first XML SAPUI5 project. Okay, save this file and go to this particular tab and then click on refresh. See, so the title of the page got changed. So this is how we are going to develop, this is how we are going to create. Okay, and this is how we are going to create an SAP UI5 project. And if you take a deep look into this SAP UI5 project, so these are all the files and got created, and obviously this is an XML and this is a controller. And if you see this particular XML, so this XML has different coding here. If you can see here, view by view, and inside this view XML ns colon core. That means SAP UI5 is a combination of different libraries. So if you can see here sap.ui.core library, so this is one of the libraries available. So this particular library is pointed by this particular core. So that means what, in case if you want to use any controls from this particular library, that control name should be prefixed by core. Okay, if you can see here like this, it is MVC, and there is something called sap.m. This is also one of the libraries available in SAP UI5. So here there is no prefix for this. That means what, so by default whichever the tag you use, that means what, by default whichever the tag. So if you can see here page by page, so this is a control from this particular sap.m. So we are not using any prefix in this. Okay, so if you can see here controller name in the sense what, so for this particular view there is a controller defined. So what is that controller? Test project 1.home. That means this particular controller. Okay, so that means this view is controlled by this particular controller. Okay, if you can see here in this particular controller there are different methods. So what are those methods? So on init, on before rendering, on after rendering, and on exit. So what I can do is, so let me quickly uncomment all this. So let's have a look at what these methods are. So these methods are called the lifecycle methods of SAP UI5 view. Okay, so what I will do is, let's put console statements, console.log inside this init method. Okay, so let's copy this and paste it over here. This is on before rendering method, and let's copy this, and this is on after rendering method, and let's copy this again and paste it over here, copy this on exit. So now what you do is, let's copy this URL and go here and paste it here and execute this. Now see, since we put this console.log statements, where can we see this console.log? So we can see in the console. So just press F12 in this and go to the console. If you can see here, see on init, on before rendering, on after rendering, but we are not able to see the output from the on exit. So that means what? On exit, see here, these are the lifecycle methods. The first lifecycle method will get execute is on init, and the second one is on before rendering, and the third one is on after rendering. But on exit is not there, because so whenever we are going to destroy this view object, so then only on exit will get execute. That means before destroying this particular view object, on exit method will get execute. Okay, so now, so which type of code we are going to write in which, let's say there are four uh, four lifecycle methods. So on init method, so we are going to write, so before initializing the view, at the time, let's say at the time of initializing the view, so let's say if you want some data from the background, okay, from the backend, so we are going to write the data fetching logic from here. Okay, so once we did get the data, and before rendering, let's say in case if you want to do something before rendering the page, so then we can write such kind of logic over here. So once the page got rendered, or once the view got rendered, so then if you want to write after rendering the view, if you want to write some logic, so you can write the logic over here. And on exit, so when the view got destroyed, so we're going to, if you want to write some logic, you can write the logic over here. Okay, this is how the this is what the structure of SAP UI5 application, and all the files got generated, and what is a view, and what is a controller, what is the index.html, and what is a web.xml, how this index.html will get load. So what's going to happen while loading this particular index.html, so it will read all these SAP UI5 libraries, and then it will load all these all the views. Since we have only one view over here, it is reading this particular view. So what is there inside view? So inside this view, so there is a page by page tag. So this is the no title of the title of this particular page, and this particular total view will be controlled by this controller. So that means there is, let's say, let me do one thing. So let me remove this particular controller name and save this, and go back to the screen, go back to the browser and refresh this. See, is there any error? So no error. That means we are able to execute the project successfully. That means what? So the view is, the controller for the view is optional. So that means what? One view can have, I mean, a view can have a controller, or it cannot have the, and controller is an optional for the view. Okay, but in case if you want to control the view, then obviously you should have a controller for this. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay. Yeah, so that's it for this tutorial. So let's meet in the next tutorial.